Next on Currents News, new video shows the moment a suicide bomber walks into a packed church in Sri Lanka and blows himself up, and now ISIS is taking responsibility. Controversy over the census. U.S. bishops have a lot to say about a major case that went to the Supreme Court today.
I just can't keep up. I mean, when I make them, people buy them automatically.
An artist outside Notre Dame telling me about his paintings that honor the fire-scarred Catholic Cathedral.
With the help of his family and his faith, one Catholic Academy student in Queens beat kidney disease. Now with some help from his classmates, they're raising awareness to find a cure. I'm Tim Harfman, and that story is coming up.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Powers. Liz Faublas is off. Fast-breaking developments today on the Easter bombings of Catholic churches in Sri Lanka. Currents News' Emily Drewby begins with more on new video of the alleged bomber.
Chilling footage shows one of the suspected Sri Lankan suicide bombers as he casually strolls towards St. Sebastian's Church. The suspect, wearing a backpack, makes his way into the building, which was packed for Easter Sunday services. Moments later, setting off a bomb that claimed the lives of over 100 worshipers. This footage shows the destruction left behind by that blast. The church, one of 3 targeted during a series of coordinated bombings in Sri Lanka that claimed the lives of 321 people. Beginning Tuesday, victims were laid to rest. Attention now focused on the suspects, along with why and how these attacks occurred. ISIS claiming responsibility through their news agency Amaq, even posting a photo purported to be the attackers pledging allegiance to the terror group, but they've made false claims in the past. According to a top Sri Lankan official, the initial investigation suggests the bombings were revenge for another recent attack.
We
have information that this attack is carried out by a radical Islamic group as a retaliation to the attack at the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand by an extremist.
That attack left 50 dead at the hands of a white supremacist. In the Sri Lankan attack, officials believe 2 different local Islamic radical groups could be involved, meaning those behind the bombings might be more connected than previously thought. Officials reiterating the terror cell or cells could have ties to an international terror group. Many of the dead are children, including a 5th grade student from an elite D.C. private school. The blast also killing Dieter Kowalski of Denver, who was in the country on a work trip. His father speaking out about his tragic loss.
Only 40 years old, and you never expect that you would outlive your son. So it's kind of sad that I did. I always hoped that I would go first, but it didn't happen that way.
The Sri Lankan government has been criticized for not acting on advance knowledge they had of the attacks. Their prime minister admitting they could have prevented the wave of bombings if there had not been a breach in communication.
At this hour, 40 suspects have been detained, all of them Sri Lankans, up from 24 held on Monday. But the investigation is really just getting started, so we expect that number to change. Michelle?
Emily, is there still a threat in the country?
The country does remain on high alert. In fact, their prime minister said during a news conference that there is still a chance that there's people on the run with bombs. They just don't know how many.
All right, thank you, Emily. That surveillance video shows the bomber entering St. Sebastian's Church. Father Sanji Wa Apenhami was in the church when the blast exploded.
It was very, very intensive in the sense that it blasted in such a way. There were children, there were women, and all close by, and all were blown off almost. So we have hundreds and more than 100 people who were killed on the spot.
The latest casualty list from St. Sebastian puts the number of dead at 122. Nearby, St. Anthony's Shrine also became a terror target. Father Jude Fernando is the administrator of St. Anthony's. He described the Easter Sunday bombing.
I never heard it like that, and really God saved my life. I was not even injured anything and due to thing. And immediately I came inside to the church and I saw people were screaming, crying, and then I started with the help of the community and staff and the priest, to send each and everyone to the hospital who are injured, and then the armed forces, they took over, and there still the investigation is going on, so we are unable to give any exact numbers because we don't know what really has still the investigation or not. But the church is extensively damaged, so you can't just simply send anyone inside.
Father Fernando said the shrine is extensively damaged, and that's hampering the official investigation. Also at St. Anthony's, when the bomb went off, Sister Ramoshini Fernando.
They killed me, it's okay. I don't have family. I offered my whole life for the love of God. But killing these innocent people, those who have families, it's really painful to see that.
The church clock at St. Anthony's Shrine now appears to be frozen to the hour when the suicide bomber struck. The Knights of Columbus is taking action tonight to help the Catholic victims of terrorism in Sri Lanka, calling the attack on that country's Catholic churches another example of the worst persecution. The organization's leader, Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, revealed what his group is doing in the wake of the Easter Sunday bombings. The Knights of Columbus stands in solidarity with our Christian brothers and sisters in this time of trial. In addition to our prayers, the Knights of Columbus is sending $100,000 to Cardinal Ranjith in Colombo, Sri Lanka, for his use in the rebuilding and repair of his Christian community in the aftermath of this act of terrorism. Back in the U.S., a big case at the Supreme Court today, one that is getting attention from America's bishops. Karen Kafer reports it's about counting people and billions of dollars in taxpayer money.
Demonstrators outside the Supreme Court.
We demand our communities to be counted.
While inside, justices heard arguments in one of the term's most controversial cases. The Trump administration wants to include a question for all census recipients about their citizenship, something that hasn't happened since 1950. Challengers say it's designed to intimidate non-citizen immigrants and suppress participation.
Fundamentally, the census is a measure we use to deliver on one of our nation's core tenets, and that is the promise of fairness.
The census, taken every 10 years, determines allocation of congressional seats and electoral college votes, and the distribution of billions of dollars in federal funding. The White House has maintained the citizenship question has been on some forms for decades, with the exception of 2010, and is crucial to reinforcing federal voting rights law.
This is something that has been part of the census for decades, and something that the Department of Commerce felt strongly needed to be included again.
3 lower courts have ruled to block the question from appearing on the census form. During arguments Tuesday, conservative justices seemed to suggest the administration is within its rights to include it, while liberal justices honed in on how it could reduce respondents. The Supreme Court term is scheduled to end before the Census Bureau plans to begin printing forms on July 1st. In Washington, Karen Kafer, Currents News.
U.S. bishops are strongly behind counting everyone, saying we urge for all people to be counted in the census regardless of their citizenship. Proposed questions regarding immigration status will obstruct accurate census estimates and ultimately harm immigrant families and the communities they live in. A U.S. appeals court ruled that the city of Philadelphia can legally exclude a Catholic child welfare agency that refuses to place children looking for foster parents with same-sex couples. The court ruled the city did not target Catholic social services because of its religious beliefs, but acted only to enforce its own non-discrimination policy. The case could be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The top U.S. official for religious freedom is accusing China of trying to stamp out religion. Ambassador Sam Brownback spoke with national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, about his fears. Brownback took a week-long tour of Taiwan and Hong Kong last month. Now he's talking about what he found, saying of China that it's the largest country population in the world in an all-out war with faith, but it is a war they will not win. Brownback questioned the Vatican's new deal with China, saying since this provisional deal was announced last year, the Chinese government's abuse of members of the Catholic community has continued. We see no signs that will change in the future. Christopher joins us now for more on the impact of Ambassador Brownback's tough talk. Now, the ambassador told you that he believes the Vatican and the U.S. can be partners on religious freedom. How does that work?
Well, Michelle, one of the things the ambassador said was like, look around the world. The Catholic Church is the one organization and institution that has boots on the ground across the world in a way that no other country or institution really can claim to have. And he said, look at Nicaragua, look at Venezuela, where there's serious issues of religious freedom. We rely on the Catholic Church, and we want to be partners to stand alongside them to say, we want to elevate religious liberty for all people of faith.
And now China was the specific focus of this conversation. What was his assessment of the state of religious freedom right there?
Well, in China, the U.S. is very concerned, not just for Christians. He said among the Buddhists there, among the Muslims, there's a severe crackdown on people of faith. And he said, look, it's the biggest country in the world in terms of population size. And so this population, every population around the world needs to be able to express its faith. But particularly, a country this big, we have to establish and push for in whatever way possible, including sanctions, if necessary, to establish the groundwork for religious freedom.
And now the ambassador has voiced some criticism of the Vatican's deal with China, which the church has said it made in hopes that will give Catholics there more religious freedom. What's the ambassador's main concern?
Well, back in September, news was announced that, this deal was made with China. Now, there's a sort of a question mark that hangs over all of this because we don't know exactly what that deal is, but it really involves the conditions in which Chinese bishops are appointed, where Beijing, the state, gets some input to make recommendations to the Vatican for ultimate approval. Now, what the U.S.'s position is that this is a dangerous precedent where other religious groups may have to sort of bow to the state to get approval. And the ambassador's point is, look, we know authoritarian and totalitarian regimes try to control religion through their leaders, and we don't want to see this precedent in which other countries have to sort of seek their permission to listen to whoever they want to sort of appoint as their leaders. So that's what the ambassador's saying. Now, he also says, look, I understand the Vatican has asked for patience on this, and we're happy to give it to them. They're ultimately a sovereign entity, but we are going to be very clear as to what we expect long term.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for that. At this morning's National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House Chief of Staff, was the main speaker. He revealed to the audience that President Trump often brings up Christianity when meeting with foreign leaders. According to Mulvaney, the president will either thank a guest for helping Christians in their country or criticize a leader for not doing enough to take care of Christians in the leader's land. There's a lot more news headed your way. Water flowed from a skyscraper in the Philippines. It's connected to a deadly disaster. An exclusive report from Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, the reason why the work of an artist is selling out fast. How a Catholic girl is helping her brother through a very tough time in life. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The man who killed Catholic Howard Beach jogger Karina Vetrano has now been sentenced to life in prison. Chanel Lewis will face life behind bars without the possibility of parole for beating, sexually abusing, and strangling Vetrano in 2016. Before he was sentenced, Lewis apologized to the family, saying he didn't commit the murder. His DNA matched what was found on the back of Vetrano's neck and under her fingernails. Several historic churches are now closed in the Philippines after a pair of deadly earthquakes rocked the country today and yesterday. At least 16 people have died in the natural disaster. Huge waterfalls cascaded down a high-rise building in Manila when the earth moved. The shaking caused damage to several churches, forcing the San Fernando Archdiocese to close them all. Tonight's forecast could cause more problems for the rebuilding of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Showers and possible thunderstorms are predicted for the French capital. Architects fear the bad weather could further damage the famous Catholic landmark. Notre Dame's vault, which partly collapsed in the fire, is already partially waterlogged from firefighting efforts. While plans to rebuild Notre Dame are underway, one artist is saying he may never again paint its portrait. Since the fire, his artwork has become a type of visual tribute on canvas with the power to move people to tears.
Bonjour, comment allez-vous? Au revoir, vielen Dank. Bonjour les filles, comment allez-vous?
He may sound like a native to the City of Lights, but it was only 15 years ago Rick Adam first dipped his brushes in France.
Back in the day, I used to hang or frequent, Chelsea and Soho, and my friends would say, Rick, you need to go to Europe.
It was there Rick met his muse, his mademoiselle, a so-called old lady, the subject of hundreds of his paintings.
The flying buttresses here, you have the spire.
The Notre Dame de Paris.
Stained glass in here in the center and whatnot.
But unlike most tourists who take photos of the famous towers, when Rick puts his brush to canvas, it's from a different vantage point.
The front is just not as dramatic as the rear or the back. You have the flying buttresses, you have a good view of the spire, you have good reflection.
But a back that will never look the same again. This painting, one of his last strokes before the smoke. No longer a reality, but a memory.
Exactly as you said.
Since the fire, they've become visual tributes on canvas.
Château de Beignet.
With the power to move people to tears.
It's just one of the most beautiful things in Paris.
Nancy Hennig choosing one with the spire she watched fall before her eyes.
They say they're going to rebuild this, but to me it's going to be like a Disneyland Notre Dame.
Yeah.
You can't rebuild 850 years.
It started in here.
Rick says his artwork has been selling fast since the disaster.
But I just can't keep up. I mean, when I make them, people buy them automatically.
Explain to him about what's the roof.
Sometimes using them as teaching tools to those too young to realize just what the world has lost.
I try to mix a little bit about the history of the cathedral and the history about Jesus.
The artist hasn't painted since the cathedral's roof crumbled, but he says one day soon he'll continue to paint what once was. As long as people still have their memories, the beauty remains. As for this one, it's had many offers.
And people saying they're going to the bank. I've refused them. So yeah, that has went up significantly. But thank you for visiting.
Yeah. He's just not ready to say au revoir.
That painting has still not been sold. A young boy in Queens had a debilitating disease. He couldn't go to school, play sports, or do anything he loved. His sister, devastated by his suffering, vowed to help him and others by raising awareness about his condition. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports.
Working on fractions in his 4th grade math class, George Kyriakopoulos looks like your typical 9-year-old. But 6 years ago, he contracted a rare kidney condition.
I felt different because everyone else got to do play sports. Everyone else got to go to school. I was not able to do all that stuff.
A student at St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Academy in Astoria, George was diagnosed with childhood nephrotic syndrome at the age of 3, a disorder where the body releases too much protein.
We thought it was just allergies. His face, and he started gaining a lot of weight on his face, and it was just so rapid.
Even with daily medication and regular doctor visits, George relapsed several times over 3 years, scaring his oldest sister, Natalia.
I was really sad, especially as an older sister, that he wasn't able to have these childhood experiences like other children.
To help raise awareness, Natalia, a graduate of the Catholic Academy, and George's other older sister, Isabella, a 7th grader at St. Francis of Assisi, led a donation drive at the school. Catholic Academy students wearing green, the color associated with kidney disorders, and raising over $1,200. Luckily, George, now in remission for the last 3 years, is enjoying school again, even placing 3rd in last year's diocesan-wide math bee. And he's playing sports too, like flag football.
I'm serious. Ask Mom.
Through his relapses and remissions, the Kyriakopoulos family has faith.
When you pray, you get better.
We're so thankful after every test that he takes. If it's high, low, I said, Georgie, what do we say? And he says, thank you, God.
Now they're praying hard for a cure, hoping no family will have to go through the same experience. In Astoria, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, what a majority of Americans are saying about religion in the public square. Plus, Pope Francis and his world travels. What's the lasting impact? We'll have some results. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all of the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper.
More tthan half of Americans want religion to play a bigger role in society. That's according to a new study by Pew Research Center. 51% want a bigger role for faith in the public square. Only 18% were against the idea. There's a generational gap in the survey. 61% age 50 and up are backing more religion. 39% between 18 and 29 say the same. The Pope is reportedly ready to create 2 new offices at the Vatican. Francis is said to be looking at one that'll be dedicated to charity. The other would help spread the Catholic faith through evangelization. There's no official comment yet from the Vatican, but the Holy Father is likely to make the new ministries happen through a law set to be signed at the end of June. An update tonight about the Pope's next international mission. The Holy Father will be visiting the Balkan nations and Bulgaria, North Macedonia, May 5th through May 7th. He plans to visit governmental authorities, meet with bishops and heads of other religions, and, of course, say Mass with the local Catholic communities. The Balkans trip is the latest journey for Francis. He's made more than 24 trips outside the Vatican during his papacy. But what impact do these missions have? Melissa Butts has some answers.
The Apostolic Administrator of Estonia, Bishop Philippe Jordan, had personally invited the Pope to visit and is thrilled that it came to pass. When in Rome, the bishop got to speak to Pope Francis after the general audience to hear his impressions 7 months after the visit.
The Pope said, I was very happy with my visit to Estonia. So it was very... And then I said, well, thank you very much, Holy Father, and pray a little bit for Estonia now, because we are in a little bit complicated political situation. And so he said he looked at me and said, yes, I've read that you had elections recently.
Now Bishop Jordan says after the papal visit, Estonians view the Catholic Church in a different way.
It's clear that there was a higher number of people wanted to become baptized or to be received in the church, that people see now the Catholic Church and especially the Holy Father, of course, as something more nearer from them. And it's very important for the future.
People are looking for masses and there are some prayer groups. It doesn't mean that they will be Catholics, but just to be in part and to show openness. This is really respectful for our church and I think for a whole church in the world.
The press representative for the Estonian Catholic Church says others sparked an interest in what's going on in the Catholic Church and the 6,000 Catholics in Estonia. But both she and the bishop are hoping for continued growth and even another papal visit.
The Pope today said us, so see you the next time.
In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
That is Currents News. Here's a programming note. Currents News will air at a special time on Friday, 6:30 p.m. Net TV is televising live coverage from a benefit concert for Notre Dame from the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington. Titled Together with Notre Dame de Paris, it will air at 7 p.m. I'm Michelle Powers. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.